Hello everyone, Katarina here. Welcome to my 9th Christmas card for this year. This card is all about coloring. I will be coloring this image with Poinsettia. I'm going to just jump right into it and start coloring. I will tell you how to get this exact image of the Poinsettia in a bit, but first I'm going to be talking about the coloring. I used here the Faber-Castell's Plychromos coloring pencils. If you want to know the exact colors, I will pop them on the screen and you will find them also listed over on my blog. However, you can use whatever coloring method you prefer. I haven't used these pencils for a while, so I decided to use them here. When I'm coloring, all I want to do is to create a little bit of depth. So I'm not really doing the typical shading, which means picking up a light source and creating shadows and highlights depending on the light source. I've been saying in my past videos that I'm not really good at shading, but the truth is, I don't really care. Depending on the image, like here with a front-facing flower, I just do the bare minimum when it comes to shading. I really love coloring, but I just don't want to spend too much time on it. All I want to do is to add a little bit of depth to the image. So what I do, I only add a darker shade at the bottom of the petal or leaf and lighter at the top, creating sort of an ombre effect. And I also add a darker shade around the petals and leaves that are overlapping. Here on the red petals, or they are actually leaves, I believe, I will call them petals. I colored here the middle lines using the darker shade, and this really helps creating the depth. And then I blended the colors together until I was happy with the look. For the coloring, I typically use 2 or 3 shades of one color. Most of the time I use 2, but if I only have 1, to create the darker shade, I either press a little bit harder or apply multiple layers, and for the lighter shade, I go very lightly. Actually, picking the colors was the most difficult part of this card because I wanted to keep it traditional, so red and green. This was one of the reasons why I used the Plychromos, because it had at least enough reds. To color the flower, I started with the middle, for which I used yellow pencils, one lighter, one darker, and I didn't spend too much time with it. This is a very tiny part of the flower. I first colored with a brighter yellow and then I mixed it with a darker yellow. For the petals of the flower or the red leaves, I used 3 shades of red. There are top and bottom leaves, and I used the dark shade and mid shade for the bottom petals, and the mid shade and light shade I used on the top petals. So the number pencil 217, I think, I used on both. And as I said, I was blending them together until I was happy with the look. And while I'm coloring the Poinsettia, let's talk about the image and where you can get it. I actually drew this image myself. This is something like a digital stamp, a digital image, printable. I call it digital stamp. And if you like it, you can get it over on my blog. I will leave the link where you can download it in the description below. Right now, it's completely free to download. All I would appreciate if you could give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you like these type of videos. Also, in the download, I include both US version A2 and the metric version A6. And when printing, I cut my cardstock to the size, in my case A6. I also adjust the size in my printing software where I select A6 and then I print it out. The cardstock I used here is the Bristol cardstock from Canson. I really like to use it with coloring pencils. I think Nina Solo White should work as well. In the past, I tried Canson XL watercolor cardstock, but I did not have any luck. You just need to experiment. And that's all about the image and how to get it. But let's get back to the coloring and how I colored the leaves. I didn't have that many greens, or more precisely greens that I liked. So for the 2 leaf branches, I used brown at the bottom of the leaf, and then I used the green pencils and I was creating the ombre effect. Darker at the bottom and lighter towards the top. Actually, brown or sepia is a great option if you do not have too many shades of the same color. It works with so many colors, not just greens, orange, red, yellow, and so on. What I found tricky when coloring was my working surface. It was a little bit too hard. I prefer to use something softer like crafting mat or even a paper pad. I used this surface for filming. It wasn't a big problem. It's just something I noticed, so I thought I will share it. To color the fir tree branches, I used a single green pencil. This was a little bit more tedious as you have to color each of the needles. At some places I did go outside of the lines, but it was not too bad. You hardly see it because it was at places where the needles were overlapping. When I was drawing this, I was thinking about just drawing simple lines for the fir tree branches where coloring would not be needed, but I decided to do it more complicated and I draw each needle separately that you have the color. But I really like it and I hope you like it too. So moving on to the coloring of the branch with the berries, I used here different reds than I used on the poinsettia, and I applied the darker red mostly at the bottom of the berry. And by the bottom, I mean the part that is closer to the branch or stem, not sure how to call it. Here especially I had problem with the surface on which I was coloring, and there are few gaps. I did color it later off camera. I also colored the berries on the holly, and I also used different reds than on the poinsettia and the berry branch. This set of pencil has a lot of reds, and I colored them the same way as I colored the other berries. I also used brown for the branch at the bottom. There is just a little part of the stem. So for the holly leaves, I didn't want to use any of the greens I already used on the other images. Don't ask me why. In my head, I wanted to use different shades. Of course, you can use one of those greens if you want. For the dark shade, I was thinking using the deep cobalt green, but I wasn't sure how it will look like at the end. So I decided to go with more subtle colors and also create my own color by adding this bright green. It's called leaf green. And after I was finished with the main coloring with the subtle colors, I did the same coloring as I did on the poinsettia leaves or petals. I went over it with the bright green, which made it slightly brighter, but not too much. And the greens on the holly still fit the colors that I used on the other images. Alright, the coloring is done. For the digital stamp, I also included the greeting, so this time no need to stamp it. So the only thing left to do is to adhere the panel onto the card base. I used a simple double-sided tape and a white card base. I thought I was done, but then I decided to adhere a few clear drops across the panel. When I was coloring, there were a few spots where I went outside of the lines. I tried to erase it and it worked, but I used this red-blue eraser and it left some streaks at one spot at the top of the berries. I thought my card was ruined, and this is why I added the clear drops. And I'm so happy that I did, as it makes the card more interesting. So the card is finished. Here you can see it in a close-up. I absolutely love it. And even though I don't spend too much time thinking about shading, I was still able to create a little bit of depth. And I hope you will have a great time coloring this image. And if you want to share your cards with me, just tag me on Instagram. You will find me at NordicBee_crafts. And if you would like to see more Christmas card ideas, on the left there are 2 cards where I also did coloring. And on the right, you can watch the full playlist with all of my Christmas cards. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.